Hello, everyone. It is a privilege for me to be sharing my testimony with you. I grew up in Aurora, but this is not the Aurora that you are all familiar with that is over there. It is a small town on the west coast. It is located between Velderif and Piketberg. So some of you might have a vague idea where that is, but it really is a small town. According to my mom, ever since I was a few weeks old, she would take me into the main service. Apparently, I was a well behaved baby, so there wasn't a need for the to go to the cry room. So, in a certain sense, I grew up in the church, literally and figuratively. Um, my parents attended every Sunday. Very earliest memories. I love the Lord. I had questions about God and who He is. And just growing up in that way, I even have a little book where, as a boy, I would write little sermons. Also, when I was young, my dad started getting sick. We did not know what it was, and it took a while before they figured out what was wrong. And the implication was that he could not actually work. And so we had to move from Aurora to the city. We moved to Belleville so that my mom could find work, and she became the breadwinner because my dad was no longer medically able to work. Moving to the city was a big shock, and it took quite a while to adjust to that for me. But we joined a church, and I carried on loving things there, loving the Lord there, growing there, being part of the youth. In school, I was part of the Christian Society activities there. But then as I moved into high school, several things happened at the same time. I started having questions which were really difficult for some people to answer. At the same time, at the church, dodgy things were going on. Some people left the church because of that. I heard reports of the church council lying to people about what happened. There was disunity between the pastors, and it was just a mess. And at the same time, the youth ministry collapsed, and so that was a big shock to me, witnessing that happen. In matric, I was going through my confirmation classes and looking at my friends from school who were in confirmation class with me. I knew what some of these people were like, what they were getting up to outside of church, the things that they were doing, the things that they were saying, and it struck me that I'm going to be standing up in front of church to be confirmed, and my testimony, my witness to the Lord would be counted the same as these other people whom I didn't believe to be sincere. And that that did not sit well with me. And in the end, I dropped out of confirmation classes. I went to university at Stellenbosch, and during those years of study, I was not attending church. I'd dropped out of the church. I had developed a really strong aversion to the organized church, organized religion. I was happy just being on my own, doing my own thing, having quiet time in the mornings. I would read the Bible and pray, and eventually I'd stopped reading the Bible and I was just praying. But I was adjusting to life at university. I was coming out of my shell. I was making new friends, moving into different friendship circles. Some of them were wholesome, some of them were less wholesome. And I think there was a big struggle around identity for me at this point. I got into a relationship, and when that relationship ended a year later, it really was a knockout blow for me. I felt knocked to the ground. I really struggled to make sense of things, and I felt that I'd hit a low. Some people probably would say I'd gone into depression. There are reasons why I don't consider that to have been depression, but it was a difficult period for me. About a year later, I felt the Lord saying to me that I've now had enough time of being outside of church, enough time of feeling sorry for myself, and that it was time to get back into the church. Now, at this point, I was scared. I'd not had exposure to different kinds of churches and different denominations. And so I was really faced with a challenge. Where do I go? How does one pick a church? How does one know whether a church is preaching the truth or not? And I became convicted that the only test there was for whether a church is being faithful was whether that church was faithful to the word. And so I went to a church which was completely unfamiliar to me. I knew that my cousin sometimes attended it, and I trusted my cousin's judgment. So I went to this church, and I remember sitting on the edge of my seat, ready for the pastor to say something that I couldn't verify in the Bible, to make a misstep that would justify me just getting up and leaving. But by God's grace, He had led me to a church where the word was faithfully handled. And so instead of church hopping, I found myself returning to this church and going back Sunday after Sunday. Eventually, I was invited to attend the Bible study, and even when I showed up at the student Bible study, people milling about, all these people whom I don't know, standing to the side, feeling a bit awkward, someone came up to me, welcomed me, and invited me to join his group, and I just immediately felt like I'd found a community, and this community respected the word. Over the next few years, I grew rapidly in my faith. Having attended the churches that I grew up in, it was like having a puzzle, a box full of puzzle pieces. You can kind of make out what the final picture is by looking at the individual pieces. But now, having joined this new church, it was like all of a sudden all the puzzle pieces fit together, and you could really see the big picture. And that was just such a blessing for me. And so I started participating in the church. I got involved in different ministries. These ministries were door-to-door ministries, others were leading Bible studies, others were going out into an informal settlement and bringing the word to the people there. And so through all of those different things, I was challenged, but also every one of them was an opportunity to grow in faith and in the word. It was also around this time that I started my blog, where I blog about theology and the Christian outlook on the world. Nearly 10 months ago, I started a new ministry which was being married to Margot. And so we are still figuring out exactly what that means and what that looks like before we move into other ministries. But it has been a time of growth. After our marriage, Margot and I decided that, for various reasons, that we wanted to join a new church. We kept the same standard on how to judge a church, and that was how faithfully they treated the word. It was community as well. We had a longing for that, and that's how we found DCC, and we have just been so warmly welcomed here. There is much for us to learn still, much for us to grow in, and we look forward to continuing our journey of growth with DCC.